The first sign of the collapse was not the message itself, but the stillness that followed. It was the kind of quiet that arrives after a bomb has gone off, leaving only the ringing echo of destruction in its wake. It didn't announce itself with a knock, but seeped in through the walls, through the digital ghost of my inbox, through the relentless, mocking flicker of the modem's green light. Everything else in the apartment felt unplugged, disconnected from a world that was still turning. The message arrived at 2:03 p.m. I know the exact time because I have stared at the timestamp more times than I have blinked today. Wedding is off. Expect a call from my lawyer. I didn't respond immediately, not because I was stunned, but because a terrifying part of me wasn't. I stood barefoot on the cool kitchen tiles, a spoonful of peanut butter suspended in the air, a tableau of a man frozen in a commercial for heartbreak. Rena's cat, a sleek shadow of indifference, rubbed against my ankle as if it hadn't just been a witness to the quiet burial of our life together, all in a few typed words. I didn't text back. I walked to the drawer where we kept our important documents, pulled out the mortgage folder, and sat at my laptop. I deleted my name from the joint application. It took 5 minutes. There were no security questions, no final warnings, just a quiet, unceremonious click. I returned to the spoonful of peanut butter, ate it, and sat in the silence that had become my new reality. I waited. By 6:00 p.m., there were 5 missed calls from an unknown number. I typed the number into a search engine. It was a law office, with a stock photo of a man whose smile suggested he sold car insurance on the side. I let it ring. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox from a Mr. Garlanade Huxley, requesting a conversation about pending contractual implications regarding the canceled nuptials. His tone was polite, but I could feel the twitch of impatience beneath the words, the way someone might pretend a building isn't on fire while holding a damp match. My reply was exactly 2 sentences. I have no pending contracts with your client. Please direct all communication elsewhere. 2 hours later, the lawyer's voicemails began to sound different, stressed, rushed, the cold legal terms mixing with hints of emotional distress. That's when the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She hadn't told him. She hadn't mentioned that I had already removed my name from the loan. She hadn't told him about the deposit I had fronted, which would now be unrecoverable if my name was not on the record. Her plan, so carefully constructed, only worked if I remained quiet and compliant. But instead of screaming, or calling friends, or broadcasting my pain, I waited. I knew Rena, and Rena had no idea that my silence was not a sign of weakness, but the prelude to something far more dangerous. When her lawyer hung up at 4:17 p.m. that afternoon without leaving a message, I knew my suspicions were correct. 5 minutes later, her text arrived. Can we talk? But this time, it wasn't cold. It was a plea. I stared at the words, letting them blur, then sharpen, then blur again. Can we talk? It was so generic, so ripped from the page of a cliché breakup script. But this wasn't a breakup. It was an execution. She had pulled the trigger hours ago. My continued silence wasn't about cruelty. It was about control. Rena thrived on being in control, and for the first time, the wheel was no longer in her hands. I went about my evening in a dull, methodical way. I reheated leftovers that tasted like cardboard, fed her cat, and sat in front of a muted television. Every buzz from my phone made my chest tighten, but I refused to pick it up. The messages became increasingly frantic. I think we made a mistake. I didn't mean to say it like that. My lawyer said you removed yourself from the loan. Why would you do that? You're ruining everything. There it was. Not we, not this hurts, not I'm sorry, just you're ruining everything. It was classic Rena, still believing this was a game she could reset by pressing the right button. But I wasn't playing anymore. The next morning, she arrived at my apartment. I had taken the day off, sensing that the storm would require my full attention. When the knock came, I didn't flinch. I waited a moment too long, then opened the door. Her face was a mask of falsely calm composure, the one I had seen her wear whenever she was 2 seconds away from losing complete control. She opened her mouth to speak, but I simply stepped aside without a word and let her in. "I was angry," she blurted, standing in the middle of the living room as if the space itself were an enemy. "You weren't listening. You weren't showing up. I said nothing. I sat down and watched her pace, like an audience member at a one-woman show. Maybe that's what all this was, a monologue where I wasn't even in the cast anymore. You can't just pull your name off the mortgage. That's not how this works. We signed things. They already did inspections. The bank called me 3 times. Still, I offered only silence. "Don't act like you didn't care," she snapped. "You begged me to pick that house. You said it was the one." I let her spiral, her words tumbling out like a broken necklace. She didn't notice that I wasn't arguing, that I wasn't defending myself. This wasn't about saving anything. It was about confirmation. "You said the wedding was off," I finally said, my voice steady, though everything inside me still trembled. "You said, expect a call from my lawyer." So I did what anyone would do. I let go. Her expression shifted. Not in anger, but in confusion. My words didn't give her an opening. "I only said that because I knew it would get your attention," she shouted. "You've been so passive. You always act like things will fix themselves. I needed a reaction." It was my turn to be stunned. "You sabotaged our wedding and the house just to get a reaction?" She hesitated. "It wasn't sabotage, it was pressure. I thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd finally show up." "And what about Albany?" I asked quietly. Her face dropped. "What?" she whispered. "The hotel receipt, the signed receipt for room 412. The same weekend I was at that family thing in Cleveland." Dead silence. No wind, no movement, just her blinking at me as if the room had tilted on its axis. I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice was as flat as the denial was weak. "You stayed with someone," I continued. "Beau. I don't know who he is yet, but I will." She sat down, shrinking into herself. Her armor was paper now, and it was beginning to burn. The truth wasn't just about her infidelity. It was the prelude to something far worse. It was the moment I realized her impulsiveness was just a mask for a colder, more calculated mind. She left shortly after, without a dramatic outburst or an apology, just a pale, quiet exit. I watched the door click shut and stood there for a full minute, breathing as if I were underwater. Then I called Nolan. He answered on the second ring as if he'd been waiting. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was strange, the tone of someone who had already mourned for me. "Not really," I said honestly. "She'd been planning something," he said. "I work in the same department. We used to be friendly. Then a few months ago she started changing, showing up late, sneaking off. One day I found her in a conference room. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was she doing? She was with Beau, some startup guy she met at a mixer. They were making out. She saw me. We locked eyes, and she said, 'You didn't see anything.' Just like that, deadpan. And then she laughed. My skin went cold. He kept going. 'She was bragging that you were boring but reliable, that you had great credit, that she'd be set up for life. She said the plan was to marry you, secure the house, and then figure things out after the honeymoon.' I finally found my voice, though it was faint. 'Why are you telling me this?' 'Because I've been used, man. Not by her, but I've seen people like her. I didn't want you thinking it was your fault.' After we hung up, I sat in silence for hours. No music, no lights, just the little digital hum of the router. I expected the pain to twist into rage, but it didn't. Not yet. What I felt was worse. Clarity. Rena wasn't impulsive. She was cold, calculated. She had played the long game, and I had been the piece she planned to sacrifice. But she hadn't expected me to withdraw, to go quiet, and watch her entire scheme collapse in real time. That night, I pulled out a box she had never seen. Inside were printed copies of every financial document we'd ever signed. She used to tease me about my little paper trail. But that paper trail was now my salvation. I checked every account, every signature. I found something I hadn't noticed before. The payment for the house's inspection had come from an old savings account of mine, one I hadn't touched in 2 years. The one she didn't know I still had access to, which meant one thing. She had used my login, my credentials, my trust, without my permission. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud. I didn't sleep. The moment I confirmed the unauthorized access, something inside me shifted. It was like flipping a coin and realizing it had landed on its edge. I screen captured everything: bank records, timestamps, login IP addresses. I made a folder and labeled it "For Me." Not for revenge, but so I would never forget how deep the manipulation had gone. The next morning, another text arrived. "Can we start over?" I didn't reply. 2 hours later, "I made a mistake, Jace." I was scared. Still no reply. Then a voice memo, which I didn't open. Instead, I called my bank. I calmly explained the unauthorized access and requested a formal inquiry. The woman on the other end, with a kind Southern accent, said she would escalate the case to their fraud department. She thanked me for being thorough. That's when I realized I wasn't being passive anymore. I was being precise. Around 3 p.m., the door buzzer rang. I knew it was her. I let it buzz 3 more times before I opened the door. She stood there in gym clothes, no makeup, holding 2 coffees. It was a calculated performance of casual intimacy. I took the cup and said nothing. Inside, she sat down. "Jace, I know you're hurt," she began, her voice gentle. "I know I didn't handle things the right way, but us, it doesn't have to be over." I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee. "Who is Beau?" I asked. Her eyes flickered. "He's no one, a mistake. You accessed my savings account while I was out of town. Used money I didn't authorize to pay for something you intended to own without me," I said, my voice cutting through her performance. "That wasn't a mistake. That was theft." Tears began to form, a quiet, deliberate tactic she used to disarm me. "I panicked," she whispered. "I thought you'd leave first." "So instead of being honest, you set me up," I replied, standing up. "You rigged the entire relationship with an escape hatch already open." "I've already filed a fraud report," I said quietly. "Your name is in the documentation." She stood slowly, her body appearing to lose all its bones. "You're not really going to do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not doing anything," I replied. "You already did." I handed her the unopened voice memo. "You can say whatever you need to in there, but I won't be listening." With that, I turned my back and stared out the window as she left. I should have felt powerful, but all I felt was empty. I had put out the fire only to find the walls were already ash. I went to the bedroom and saw a manila envelope I hadn't noticed before, pulled out while I was gathering the bank statements. It had no label, just a small circle scribbled on the back, one of Rena's habits for marking something private. Inside were printed pages. It was a spreadsheet, a list of names, dozens of them, each followed by short, coded descriptions. Reliable but clingy, too cheap, already hooked someone else, and next to my name, safe, loyal, credit score 800 plus, emotionally avoidant but easy to control. My heart stopped. I wasn't a person to her, I was a column in a strategy. I called Nolan again. He wasn't shocked. "She joked about having dating stats," he admitted. "Thought it was just her being edgy." "It's not a joke," I said. "It's organized. She had me marked from the start." He then dropped the other bombshell. "There's another guy, Tommy in HR. Rena offered him money to delete the visitor logs from that day. She's been cleaning her tracks." I hung up, my mind racing. She was methodical. She had been playing a long game, and I wasn't the first. I wasn't the last. I was just the one who finally found the scoreboard. I backed up every file, every document, every image. I broke the lock on her manifestation journal and found not poems, but strategies. Find someone with emotional vacancy but strong income, one entry read. Play the long game. Never admit to guilt. Redirect to their failures. My name appeared again, with notes predicting how I would respond to the cancellation. She expected the silence. She expected the mortgage withdrawal. She just didn't expect me to keep going. The next day, she showed up again, wearing one of my old hoodies, a calculated gesture of nostalgia. I let her in, needing to see where she thought this would go. "I know how this looks," she began. "You're going to have to be more specific," I replied. "I think it's fraud. I think it's manipulation. I think it's emotional conditioning over the course of a year. Am I wrong?" She froze. "You're not being fair." "I'm being exact." "I didn't plan to hurt you," she said, the tears now genuine. "He was never the point." "Using me was," I cut in. "You mapped me, Rena, like a case study. You leveraged me as a tool for your stability. You blamed my silence when I stopped being useful." "You weren't supposed to find that list," she blurted, instantly regretting it. I raised an eyebrow. "That's your takeaway?" Her tears flowed freely now. "I'll tell you what you want. The truth. All of it. Just don't go to the police." "Why would I do that?" I asked. "Because it wasn't just a fling. He helped me open that account. He works for the mortgage broker." My stomach twisted. She wasn't just working with a casual accomplice. He was in on it, a player, a co-conspirator. The plan was to use me for the loan, then she and Beau would split the house and fake a separation. But now, he was threatening her. She showed me threatening texts from numbers she didn't recognize. "He's unhinged, Jace. I don't even know his real last name." "And you came here?" "Because I don't know what to do," she said, looking more cornered than manipulative. "I thought you're the only one who ever saw me as anything worth saving." I almost laughed at the irony. "You want me to save you?" Then a precise knock came at the door. I looked through the peephole. No one. Taped to the door was a single white envelope. Inside, a printed screenshot of my apartment's lease agreement with one chilling sentence scrawled in red Sharpie across the top. "You're asking the wrong questions." Rena went white. "He knows where you live. Knows you're involved now. That means he's scared," I said, folding the paper. "If he was in control, he wouldn't be warning us. He'd be acting." "What do we do?" she asked, her voice small. I stared at the envelope, then at the flash drive on my desk, full of evidence. "We give him a reason to act." I opened my laptop and began drafting an email. Not to the police, not yet. To a federal agency, someone who investigates patterns. The subject line I typed was slow and deliberate. Urgent mortgage fraud pattern involving internal collusion. Rena looked like she might throw up. But me? I finally felt a sense of calm. For the first time in this entire mess, I wasn't reacting. I was moving. And the fallout was just beginning.